Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Who dares awaken me from my slumber? William Scott White, a member of the Midnight Society science team. This must mean, of course, you and I have business to attend to, and you even did bring me something to feast on. Absolutely delicious. Now that I am fully revamped and recharged, please pass me the keys so that I can release myself from my silver chains and shackles. Are you ready to go and collect some overdue contracts?
My creatures of the night. Yes, you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy on LordeStarfox Radio. I have some big announcements that here in the future on Midnight Lycanthropy and also my sister podcast, Camp Nightmare Fuel, we are going to be bringing so much more great science to everything. I am going to be featuring my science team as much as possible. Yet tonight, we already have one of the Midnight Society scientists sitting around the late night fire waiting for us to burn the midnight timber. I, of course, am referring to William Scott White. You should recognize that name. A bi-weekly host here in the good old Fox Den. Definitely much appreciated. There are a few contracts, Mr. White, that are outstanding, and I do need to collect them. Are you ready to take a walk into the madness with me?
Absolutely. Always ready.
Love it, my friend. To the audience tonight, yes, Mr. White has some amazing nightmare, creepy, epic, whatever you want to choose for any of those vocabularies to share with us, and we are going to let him talk about some of the strange things that have unfolded with his sister lately. You ready to do this? The mic's yours, man.
Let's do it. Yeah. So my sister lives on a pretty large rural property here in Southwest Ohio, somewhere around 70 acres of woods and some fields and a large pond. Um, and about 2 weeks ago, her dogs were going crazy. She's got several dogs. She raises goats, a pretty big herd of goats actually. So she's got a lot of livestock guard dogs and other dogs as well for the property. And her dogs were absolutely losing their minds. Um, and my niece comes in and says, "Hey, mom, a bunch of the dogs are at the pond and they're barking at something, and I can't get them to come in. And can you see what's happening?" Now, my sister is several months pregnant now. She's really starting to show. So she hops in her car and drives to the pond and has the headlights of the car, pointed at the pond. And so she sees, like five or six of her dogs just on the shore barking and acting all anxious and antsy. And in the headlights, she can see one of her dogs who is out in the middle of the pond swimming. Now, apparently, he doesn't normally swim in the water. He likes to play in the shallows, but she's never actually seen him swim. And this pond is deep, probably at least 20 feet deep in the center where he was at. So there's no way he was just standing. He was swimming. And so she was calling for him to come to shore. And when she did, she noticed another shape in the water. She said it was a head, and it was about as big as a dog's head. So, we're not talking about like a Dogman or a Bigfoot or something like that. It's not a giant head, but still noticeable in the water near her dog. And it turned and looked at her. And she said that she could feel that it was like it basically had acknowledged her presence. Didn't threaten her. She didn't feel terrified, but she felt strange. And she could see that it was a head because she could see the eye shine on it. But because, her headlights were pointed in one direction and she had gotten out of the car, she really couldn't shift them to try to get a better lighting and really get a good identification on whatever this thing was. And after it kind of looked at her and acknowledged her, it just sunk under the water and wasn't seen again. And, the dog that was swimming, she got him back to shore. And she said he was limping, not like he was hurt. She's no sign of being hurt, but like he had been swimming for a while, like his muscles were tired. And so the interesting thing about the property is it's about a mile away from the Little Miami River. And the Little Miami River here in Southwest Ohio is a beautiful scenic river. But historically, as far as cryptids and supernatural things go, it is significant because the Little Miami River passes through Loveland, Ohio, probably about 20 miles away. And Loveland, Ohio is famous for the Loveland Frogman sightings that happened in, I think it was the 1950s or 1960s, where a couple police officers saw and reported seeing like a 3-foot tall frog looking walking upright creature on a bridge that passes over the Little Miami River. And then several other people for the next several years spotted, this entity off and on near the river. So I bring that up because they're only about a mile away from that river. The pond actually drains into a creek that drains into that river. So there's definitely a viable pathway for a creature to make it from the Little Miami River up to their property. But I'm not saying it's a frogman. That was just the first thing that came to my mind when I was trying to suss out what it could possibly be. But I thought it was a very interesting experience, definitely outside of the normal for that property. And my sister's a very level-headed person. She's a nurse. She doesn't get into the cryptid stuff like I do, but she knew that I was interested in it. So I was the first person she called after it happened. So anyway, that's a little bit of recent happenings in Southwest Ohio.
Wow. That's some pretty gnarly stuff right there. To the audience, Mr. White is one of my buddies. I do consistently talk to him. I actually knew about that before. Y'all just got to hear it. Do you, by any chance, potentially think it could have been? I know people say directly wolves don't inhabit Ohio, yet you and I have talked before with Wisconsin and Michigan and wolves being seen up to 600 miles away from their den. Also, the case with that mountain lion that came from the Midwest all the way up to Pennsylvania. People, for some reason, seem to think that animals are kept to these little areas, meaning if you and I are a polar bear and we're coming down from Alaska and all of a sudden Canada's right there, do you look at me and be like, I don't know, brother polar bear, doesn't look like Alaska anymore. See, the snow's not the same. We can't go over there. Recently in Vancouver, this is so cool. We're watching evolution happen. They have the sea wolves that were following the salmon because the salmon were no longer coming to these grounds. They had been seen up to 60 miles out in water going to new areas. And they found a new island that was full of deer and also sea otters. They absolutely eviscerated it. And now they are again back out trying to find new territories. They have also been seen attacking and being successful at capturing seals while they're in the water, all kinds of things. It's amazing.
It's amazing because that's at least the evolutionary theory of how whales and dolphins and seals and sea lions, because, theory of evolution is that everything started in the water, then an amphibian type fish made it onto land, was successful genetically, and over the period of time, its descendants evolved and progressed to the point where they were living on the land full time, and then eventually, a wolf-like creature starts hunting in the water more, and the same thing happens. It succeeds, it breeds, and over time it becomes fully aquatic. And
Mm.
that's where we get our whales and dolphins and other large mammals in the ocean from. So if this is what's happening, that's crazy to see it happen. At least the start of it in real time.
Amazing stuff by you right there. Yes, this is absolutely epic to watch this unfold. I do
Yep.
encourage you to do some of your own research after, and same thing with the audience out there. Amazing people working on this right now. There are plenty of outlets and plenty of brilliant minds that will share it with you and be able to show you the information you are looking for. Now, when we think, all right, well, you have Canada up there and such. I don't think it's far fetched that maybe a Canadian wolf now could swim down into Michigan and Wisconsin.
Doesn't even have to cross the Great Lakes. There's Michigan has a land border with Ohio, and there's bridges, and there are areas where Michigan and Wisconsin touch Canada, and yeah, I mean, there's no reason why a wolf couldn't, physically get to the lower 48 states, from Canada.
Right? That's what I'm saying, my friend. I'm not saying it was a wolf in Ohio near your sisters. I was just potentially asking if that is plausible, or maybe could it have been, per se, another dog, maybe enjoying swimming more than your sister's dog normally does? Or could it have been something like a beaver or such that was in there?
I thought about that, like things like muskrats and
Yeah.
beavers. Yeah, that might be more likely than a dog, because dogs don't usually stay submerged in the water.
Yep.
I don't even know if they have a great capacity to hold their breath, but obviously animals like beavers and otters and muskrats, more semi-amphibious mammals, they do stay underwater for periods of time. So that could very well be it. You know. And like we've said before, when you hear hoofbeats in America, you should think about horses and not zebras, right? So it is much more likely that it's something like that than that it's an elusive, bipedal amphibian frogman thing. So, um, but yep.
So gnarly. Yet now to, bring some interesting information on the whole Dogman topic is there's a ton of cases of people who have reported instances where they're out fishing and they see something that literally looks like a massive canine swimming underneath
I've
them.
heard
You
of
had
that. Yeah.
one gentleman in Michigan that had his line tugged where he knew something was on there. Apparently, this dog creature he had seen played the whole orca aspect. Hey, let you do all the hard work. I'm just going to
Steal
take
the
it.
fish.
Yeah. And then down in Louisiana, you had somebody sitting there fishing and he swore he saw some strange bear like canine creature walk into the water, walk past him, and the air bubbles came up in the aspect of, like he said, it seemed like it was north to south. This thing was standing and walking. So there are plenty of reports of, again, dogmen and such being aquatic, and like you said, the Loveland frog. Do you think there is anything that could support and point to that? I mean, in these areas, is this near, per se, some of the hot spots with like the Ohio Dogman, Germantown, Butter Street?
I mean, it's not terribly close to like Germantown, and Oxford's another place that's had a dogman encounter. Um, it's probably 40 miles away from those locations, give or take. But that's not to say it wouldn't be possible. It's, like I said, it's a very rural, lots of farms, lots of woods, river bottoms. So they one of the big theories with cryptids is that they like to travel along waterways because they're lower, and that gives them more cover. They're not gonna be like silhouetting themselves on a high point. They're gonna be down in some
Mm-hmm.
river basin or stream cut. Um, and also, tends to be flatter, so it's easier to walk.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there's no reason why Ohio cryptid wouldn't be in this area. It's also very close to the Fort Ancient, which is a famous proto Native American mound builder site. Like it was built by people that were here before the actual known Native American tribes were here.
Wow.
And yeah, so this area has a lot of that too. Tons of mounds, the well-known sites, as well as people have mounds on their properties. You're not supposed to dig in them; they're protected. Some people who are a little more leaning towards paranormal might say, "Oh, maybe it's some sort of a Native American spirit or curse," because they have had weird things happen on this property. Said she has lots of dogs. She's had 2 or 3 that have just perfectly healthy young dogs, like 1 to 2 years old. So they're not puppies, but they're in the prime of their life.
Mhm.
Just up and with no signs of trauma or sickness on them. Perfectly healthy one day. Next morning they go out. They're curled up in the barn. Orb lights on the
Mhm.
property and stuff like that. Other sightings of weirdness. So it could be maybe a little more supernatural, paranormal. It could be, like I said, maybe just a beaver that likes that pond and mostly stays out of sight during the day, but was swimming around at night and that attracted one of the dogs. Or it could be something like the frogman. Who knows? So
Wow. Again, such interesting stuff because we have so many reports of supposedly these dog creatures being very aggressive and taking people's pets and such, right? And then you have a couple where they say they were playing with each other. Again,
right.
I still don't even know if Dogman has to be canine. There's a lot that points that it could really be primate-ish too. We're still trying to figure this stuff out.
I think because it looks canine, people assume it's canine.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be, if we're talking about a natural creature, it could be parallel evolution, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like it just has those same features, look like a canine, but it has nothing in common with canines, which also might explain why they're so hard to. Yeah, I certainly don't think that it has to be, or that it even is likely to be canine at all. But
Yes, I love her right there because, again, hyenas, not canines, look like canines. And then you have platypus, looks like a duck. It's not a duck, right? It's a
not a duck.
marsupial.
Yep.
Again, very interesting. Yet, in one of these cases, you had a gray wolf, I believe it was Michigan, with all the locals. It seemed like it was just interested in playing with these dogs. It's the only case I've ever really heard of this occurring, and unfortunately, it got too close to somebody's property to interact with their dog, and
Mhm.
this farmer just blasted it. Yet, for the most part, usually wolves don't play kind with people's dogs. I
Yeah,
can.
usually they predate on them. They'll
Yep.
use them as food, but at the same time, they also will mate together. In the right
Mm-hmm.
season. And there are cases where one or the other joins the pack. The other day, I saw a video about a brown bear in Russia. The mother had been several years before, and some scientists knew about that, but they couldn't track down the cub, and they were a little upset about that because it was like, oh, this young cub's probably going to on its own. And then several years later on a trail cam, they see a pack of wolves come by the trail cam, and in the middle of this pack of wolves is a juvenile but large brown bear. So
Mm.
they assumed that it was the same brown bear as the cub, and that one way or another they got adopted by this pack of wolves. And I've seen in Yellowstone, there's a case where a cow joined a herd of bison. And the cow is
Huh?
significantly smaller than the bison. I mean, animals do crazy things sometimes, but usually they follow patterns. It'd be much more likely for those wolves to eat the young bear than to adopt it, right?
Mm-hmm. Again, it's like Forrest Galanti says, we only know 60% of animal behaviorisms, right? So just like what we spoke about right there with you and I is, for the most part, we know wolves will prefer to get a nice old meal. But then we just talked about a case where it was just chilling, right? And also you just talked about a few cases. So that shows the ratio of the 40% that we are never going to know. We're not wolves, okay? We're not foxes. We're not raccoons. We're never going to fully understand what they're thinking and how they interact. We're always going to put a human twist on it to supposedly understand it.
Yep, exactly.
Here's something for you too. When you were talking about being durable, I don't know if you've had a chance yet to watch Gladiator 2. Yes, this is Hollywood. All right, I'm just going to use this example, though, because I've preached this before about how the Dinopithecus has the probability of still kicking around with the cave hyenas, the short-faced cave bear. In that movie, the gladiators are battling Dinopithecus, these giant baboons that are the size of them. Again, maybe men back in Roman times weren't necessarily all above 6 feet. I don't know. I don't specialize in that, right? Also, we are talking about Hollywood. Yet, when you do look at the statistics and the real aspects of Dinopithecus, yes, the majority of men across the world, this thing would stand and look you directly in the face.
I'm
I
sure.
personally would think those baboons would be much more durable than a canine enya, right? Which could then fall into line with what you're saying about being harder to take down. They have huge fangs. They have pointy ears and elongated snouts. They have manes. They're absolutely insane. They're barking. They're running up on 2 legs, 4 legs. It's insanity.
Yeah, well, apes in general have much denser muscle fibers than we do, and and I mean the more dense your muscles, the more durable they're going to be, the more they're going to be able to resist damage and whatnot. Um, I don't know about their skeletons. Usually, things need to be in balance. So if you have and they're like, apes are 5 or 6 times as strong as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about something that's significantly stronger, the muscles are pulling significantly harder on the bones when they're
Mm-hmm.
exerting themselves at their full potential. Those bones are going to also have to be denser and stronger to handle that. It's kind of like I had a
Mm-hmm.
buddy who was going to school to become a diesel mechanic, and he was talking about doing engine swaps on cars, and he was explaining to me, because I wasn't a car guy, that if you put a 600 horsepower engine into a normal car, let's say I don't know, a Honda Civic, right? It's not really going to work unless you change a lot of other things on the car, like the drive chain, the whole interface of the transmission to the engine, the CV joints,
The
giving power
chassis,
to the
everything.
wheels.
Yep.
Exactly. You're great. You have this huge engine, but now when you give it the beans, it's going to tear itself apart because everything else is still weak. So yeah, if gorillas and chimpanzees are 5 or 6 times stronger than humans, if they had the same bones as us, they'd tear their skeletons apart. So they've got to have denser, stronger, tougher bones.
Ooh.
So that makes sense that yeah, potentially, if you were fighting a man-sized ape, not only is it going to be stronger and faster than you, it's also going to be harder.
Yeah, exactly. Something the size of us, that's a giant Dinopithecus baboon, that could probably take on 3 men for a little while. Maybe if you miss on your swing, well, it's not going to miss when it clubs you,
Right? Yep.
So
Absolutely.
gnarly.
Those are things people don't take into account, and then you've got other animals that you would figure are very strong and fierce and tough, like say a large mountain lion. A
Hmm.
large male mountain lion could be 250 pounds, could be my weight. They don't have dense muscles. Their muscles are lighter weight. They're felines. Their bones are lighter weight.
When your sister was having this all unfold in this area, are there potentially any burrows or anything that she's seen down by there? Because, hyenas and such are digging burrows. And if these dogmen like creatures per se are out there, there are cases of them, again, using riverbeds and
Mhm.
digging burrows as well. It wouldn't necessarily be too far fetched to think it could have had a burrow somewhere around there, whatever this was,
Sure.
while it was playing per se with the dog. Did she feel in danger at all?
She said she didn't, feel like it meant her harm. Like
Hmm.
she felt like it was something abnormal. She said it gave her like I don't know if you want to call it a creepy or a spooky vibe, but at the same time she didn't feel scared, like
Hmm.
um but I don't know about any burrows. However, this part of Ohio, the bedrock is actually pretty near the surface, and it's limestone.
Ah,
And limestone is what caves are formed in, right? And you know, Kentucky is famous for its caves. It's got a Mammoth Cave
yep.
and a bunch of caves, whatnot. Well, I mean, the only thing that separates Kentucky from Ohio is the Ohio River. This is
Hmm.
basically the same type of geology, and we have a
Okay.
ton of caves and caverns as well in this part of Ohio for sure.
Wow. That's what I'm saying right there. That's interesting. I've mentioned before, sure, it might not be likely, and you've spoken about it as well, and so has Meiku, our spur longer. Sure, some of the more shallower parts of the caves where you and I and everybody else still stays out of, an animal could inhabit and be okay, right? Yet,
Sure.
if we're going to roll with the aspect of when these things have been seen cupping drinking water in Michigan by those three friends, okay, that seems like something's thirsty. If it per se wasn't playing by the rules of you and I or the rules of our atmosphere, why are you drinking water? Also, it's been seen on the side of the road consuming things. In other cases, these entities and such are taking something and eating it. Well,
Yep.
doesn't that seem like you and I were hungry, right? Again, if you're not playing by the rules of this realm, why are you now eating something? I don't know the most about supernatural and paranormal,
Sure.
yet as far as I have ever been educated, I don't think a spirit or such just picks up a piece of steak and starts eating it,
No, no,
correct?
you're right.
Okay.
And I've thought about that too, trying to bridge my several different theories I've got about the topic. And one of my thoughts is that they may not always be corporeal, physical. And when they're not, they may feed off of more, like I've said before, strong emotions.
Hmm.
But then whatever change happens, where they come more into this physical world and have a physical body, physical bodies, they, you know, have to follow the rules. They have to follow the
Yeah.
laws of thermodynamics, and so energy
Okay.
has to be consumed in order to be expended. So yeah, if they're, moving a 400-pound giant canine body, it's going to need some calories. They're going to have to find deer and fish and whatever else.
I love it, man. See, I can definitely get down with something like that because that would explain a little bit of the actual science part. Meaning, like you just said, again, I could be incorrect here, but you're the scientist. If something is drinking water in front of me, damage can be caused to it, correct?
That's my thought. That's my theory. If it can harm you physically, and if it's in this world, firmly enough to cause physical damage to something, then according to how my brain thinks, but I could be wrong, it's should be possible that physical damage can be done to it, right? That's how I
Yeah.
think.
But then, like you said, per se, if it hasn't fully manifested or such, and there's other stuff going on, well, that would make a lot of sense too, because you and I can't just punch energy, correct?
If you're shooting at a, just the basically the spiritual image of a dog man, let's call it. Well, your bullet is physical; it's not spiritual. So
Yeah.
if it does no damage, that may be why. And then we've got stories of people shooting the dogman and actually seeing physical damage on it. Pieces of
Hmm.
meat hanging off of them and blood and so I have to assume that in that case it was definitely a very real physical being, but maybe in the cases where they're certain they hit it but it showed no signs of slowing or being hit, maybe it actually wasn't 100% in our reality, in our dimension. So,
Reach right there. That makes me think, as we are tying this up, the Shakuwaran up in Canada and the Nahanni Valley, and where these indigenous cultures would literally be talking what you just talked about. They would see this large looking hyena that apparently was a spirit, right? Okay, well, if there could be spirits of humans and things that have
sure.
souls, well, animals have souls too. It's
I
really
like
not
to
that
think they
far
do.
fetched. Yeah, to have that actually be, per se, the soul of something. Okay, I'm still cool with all this. Well, these indigenous people are very successful hunters and they know how to take down large game. All right. Well, they were shooting bows and should have been correct and apparent to take down what they needed to. Yet nothing was happening. It would go through this entity and it would go away. But then this other side of this entity, they would call it the dog because it would come at night, a large looking hyena thing, and literally shred and consume and eat their dogs. Seems like there was maybe a spiritual aspect, or was it something like you had just mentioned? Was that one and the same, but was it actually physical when it was eating and such? So
Yeah.
bizarre.
Is there like a transition period? Is it like, they come from wherever they come from? Maybe they arrive here in their more incorporeal form, spiritual form. They have to do something, feed off of enough emotions to have enough of that energy to then bring themselves fully into the world. I don't know. That's just, thoughts I've had. And I've actually never heard anyone else talk about that. It's just me brainstorming when I'm trying to, because like I said, I've spoken about my various theories about what's going on. And so I'm trying to come up with like the universal idea that bridges it and allows them all to work. So I know this is, it's not Occam's razor. It's the opposite of Occam's razor, right? Occam's razor is the simplest answer. This is like the more complicated answer. But it's an idea I've been working on.
Let's go nerd out, man. That's great stuff for sure. My final question to you is, with everything that did unfold with your sister, everything that we spoke about tonight, everything that you shared, everything that we just brainstormed up, at the moment, do you feel yourself it could have been a Dogman or something else? Do you think there's a higher probability of that? Or do you think it's maybe a 50-50 split where it could have been something else too? Or how do you feel about this
I
whole thing as we
really,
close it up?
I really don't think it was a Dogman. Simply because she said its head was about the same size as the dog, her
Hmm.
dog that was in the water, his head. And, obviously Dogmen are known to have very large heads, even,
Huge, yes.
large in proportion to their already large bodies.
And a wolf in
Um,
general too, right? Huge
right,
head. So, okay.
right. And I do think it's very possible it could have been like we talked about, maybe an otter, maybe though they have smaller heads than dogs. I mean, especially this dog, he's a good sized dog. Um, a beaver, something like that. That's a very plausible and rational idea. But the way she talked about like kind of getting these like intuitive feelings from this thing makes me, feel like she feels like it's something more supernatural.
Wow.
So who
That's
knows?
so cool, man. Heck yeah. Well, do me a favor, obviously, if you get a chance to keep on churning up some good old theories about this. Same thing with your sister. If anything else unfolds, definitely tell her to reiterate it to you. It would be pretty interesting and epic to see if you and I maybe couldn't get to the bottom of it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, I am. That property is an interesting property. It's a nice place, but there's definitely some vibes to it. I'll put it that way. It's can go either way as far as good vibes or bad vibes. So
Very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you so much for allotting some time to hang out with us tonight, my friend. It's always awesome to sit down and nerd out with you and really get out some great information and just have epic discussions as to how this could fit in or maybe how it couldn't. It's really appreciated. And I do definitely appreciate everything you do for myself and Midnight Lycanthropy. And I look forward to seeing you here in a few weeks, man.
All right. It's always a pleasure to be here.
My legendary creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for stopping in tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth to the algorithm. And remember, there are monsters in the darkness.